Hey guys, fishing and stuff. Today, I'm doing a DIY that'll help you catch more fish, which is awesome. Because this DIY allows you to cover water while you're fishing. You know what I'm saying? And what we're making today are some high-tech planter boards. I've actually did several videos on planter boards. I think I made 3 how to make them, and I had 1 video on how to use them. So if you've never used planter boards and you want to know how, go watch that video after you get through watching this video. Look, learning how to use these things really does increase your yield while you're fishing. That's a good fish right there. And I'm not just telling you what I think, I'm telling you what I know. So let's jump right into this build, and we're going to start by going over the materials. So I'm starting with a piece of acrylic. This is actually cast acrylic. There's also extruded acrylic. Extruded. Like I was saying, extruded acrylic. You could also use plastic sheet like a cutting board, or you could use fiberglass. You could even use carbon fiber if you wanted to. I mean, it doesn't really matter. The technical definition for these are called clear boards. And even though they're clear, it doesn't make them any cheaper. Now the other material I'll be using is balsa wood. And balsa wood is pretty interesting wood. This has actually been around for years, and they used it to make lures. I used it to make a float on video, and most of you seen that. Balsa wood is very buoyant. I've compared this to foam, and I compared it to cork before. The last set of planter boards I made, I used aluminum on the bottom and I used balsa wood on the top. Do you see how good a shape this stuff's still in? I mean, there's no dents in it or anything. That's why I used it. But this balsa wood has been really tough, and it's done a really good job at lasting, because as you can probably see, I've used the heck out of these things. Now this last set I made them 10 inches by about 5 inches. I want them just a tad taller. I want to see if they'll dig just a little bit better. So the first cut I'm going to do 5.5 inches by 10 inches. I'm going to cut these 1.5 inches by 2 inches. This last set of planter boards I made them 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches across. But on these planter boards, we're making these a little bit different. Now that I got my acrylic cut up, at least I got them to the right depth. I'm still gonna have to trim them as long as I want them. And I got my balsa top pieces cut. They're cut the same exact thickness as my other planter boards, 1.5 inch. But the tops of them are just a little bit wider. This acrylic that I'm using is 3/16 of an inch, because I want a little bit of weight to the bottom. On the top pieces, I'm not sandwiching them together this time. This time I'll be cutting a groove down the center, and I'm going to use my table saw to do that. If my blade's not thick enough, I'll move the fence just a little bit, and I'll make it to where it's 3/16 of an inch, and this acrylic will fit in there snugly. Like I said, I bought cast acrylic. One thing I do like about cast acrylic is it comes with this really durable paper on it, which means you can work with it without scratching it all up. Regular extruded acrylic comes with a thin plastic sheet on it, and you can still scratch it through that sheet while you're working on it if you're not careful. This paper on this is pretty dang durable, and I like that. So now we got our groove cut in it, and you see what I mean? Our plexiglass fits right in there pretty snug. I overcut it just by a little bit, and that'll just give the epoxy room on both sides of it. The next thing I need to do is cut this to length, and then I'm going to drill some little holes across the very top. Those little holes are going to allow the epoxy to go inside of this acrylic and hold it into this wood. When I drilled out this piece of acrylic, it did great. But when I drilled out this piece of acrylic, it cracked out in a couple of places, here and here. It broke towards the top, So it should be fine, because once I epoxy this thing into the wood, it'll probably end up making it hold even better. A company sent me a laser a while back to try out, and I hadn't had the opportunity to use it on video yet, but I think these planter boards just might be perfect. The laser I'm using today is called an X tool. It's a 10-watt diode laser, and from all the reviews I've watched, it's one of the best diode lasers on the market.
And it might be the nicest diode laser I've ever tested.
See, lasers are pretty dang cool if you ain't never used one. And there's tons of stuff you can do with them. You can cut wood, you can etch wood, you can etch tumblers. I mean, you can etch the stainless steel on a tumbler, or you can buy the powder coated tumblers and just burn the powder coat off of them. They really are pretty cool. My wife's the CNC guru of the family, so I got her to help me. Something that's really interesting about etching fiberglass, or in our case, acrylic, because they say acrylic etches the best. That's why I'm using acrylic on these planter boards. But something interesting about this process is a diode laser won't etch acrylic. Makes a lot of sense, don't it? And that's what I said. Actually, the diode laser shines through the acrylic and doesn't do anything to it. So, we had to put it on a piece of steel that the laser can see. We actually etching the steel, and the heat coming off the steel transfers back into the acrylic, leaving an etch. You didn't know I was so smart, did you? Yeah, my wife told me how to do it. It really is amazing how detailed these lasers can be. I mean, they can do little minute stuff. Look at the writing on this planter board, how small that is. What you waiting on?
Click subscribe, people. What you waiting on? What you waiting on?
What you waiting on? But I love the way this planter board turned out. And the way I see it is, if it don't work good, I'll just use it for a sign. You know, that's freaking awesome. So the next step in this clear board DIY is I'm going to take my wood pieces, I'm going to cut them down to the proper length to fit the planter boards that we've made. Here's a little pro tip. If you do make yours the same measurement as mine, a tube of caulk is the same exact width, about 2 inches. But you can use a tube of caulk to round your corners off. I'm just saying. Man, these tops look a lot better since I sanded them down. If you want yours to look good, just take your time and do a little hand sanding. The next step to this process is we're gonna have to drill 2 more holes. We're gonna drill one for a release clip right here, and we need the one that clips on the line in the back right here. And to drill these holes and not crack this board, you probably need to drill it against another piece of wood, but you don't want to use this piece of wood. I'm going to use this piece of wood. One more thing, for drilling these 2 holes, see how close this one is to the corner? I'm afraid the drill bit's just going to snap that off, just like it snapped off some of our top pieces. But we can live with this because it's going to be stuck in epoxy, but we really can't afford to snap this corner off. So I got this little cordless Dremel, and I'm going to use it just to be safe. Now you can try it with the drill on slow speed. I wouldn't press down hard though. I think this Dremel might work a little bit better. Now, something else you should remember when working with acrylic or fiberglass, when you're drilling the holes and stuff and you get dust all over it, don't wipe it off with a regular rag, because a regular rag will scratch this stuff up. It's probably gonna get scratches on it anyway, but if you want to keep it looking nice, get you one of those microfiber soft cloths and use it to clean it with. Now the next step to this process is we're going to have to epoxy this thing into this groove. So if I put my 2-part epoxy in this groove right here, the epoxy is just going to run out the end of it. So what I decided to do is get me some masking tape and put on the ends. Then put my epoxy in it. Then I'm going to stick my planer board down in it, line it up, make sure it's plumb, and let it dry. After it dries, I can pull that masking tape off the end of it, and if any sticks to it, I'll clean it up with some sandpaper. So I took masking tape Actually, it's painter's masking tape. And I taped up the acrylic on this planer board, and I used a couple of sheets of notebook paper just to make it easier and faster. Now I got this thing ready to seal my bottom. I thought about leaving it natural, but I think I'm gonna paint it so it's easier to see when it's in the water. So next, I'm gonna have to spray paint this thing. I just decided to paint this thing white, but it turned out really awesome. I really do like this. If nothing else, it's pretty. On most planer boards, you put a split ring and you put a swivel on it. On this one, I'm gonna try something different that's a little bit simpler. You could take a clip like this, put two of them together, and just clip it right onto the back of the board, and it makes things a lot simpler. But something else you could do that I talked about on the hack video is you could use a paper clip on this. On the front stud that the release clip goes on, I did this all sorts of ways. I started going and getting threaded rod. Threaded rod's really cheap. You can get one piece and make both of them. And all you want to do is either grind down the end or heat it up and beat it flat. But once you get it flat on the tip, then you can put your split ring on it, your release clip, and it's ready to go on there. But on the end, you'll need 2 nuts. And I use locking nuts because you don't want to lock this thing down on that acrylic or it might crack it. Just snug them together onto the board, and when you're finished, you got yourself an awesome clear board. Or just planer board, whichever one you want to call it. But I tell you what, this thing looks pretty dang good, and I'm thinking it's going to work pretty dang good. Well, that planer board turned out awesome. I really do like it. I'm just saying. And just like that planer board says, I don't know what you're waiting on.
What you waiting on? What you waiting on?
You should go over to my channel page because I got a lot of DIYs on there. And if you go check them out, you're probably gonna be impressed. Probably so impressed that you'll click subscribe and you might just want to ring the bell. I'm just saying. But either way, I appreciate you watching and I'll see you on the next build.